Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Breaking Brews Podcast, a podcast focused on the business thriving craft beer industry. Whether you're one of the thousands of people making craft beer what it is today, or just love great beer and want to know more about it, this show is here to cover everything from sales, marketing, branding, culture, and much, much more. The Breaking Brews Podcast delivers real-life scenarios and experiences from industry professionals that will help your beer knowledge evolve. To tap into more great beer content, visit breakingbrews.com today. And now, the moment you've been waiting for. Let's get this session started. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is time once again to gather around the mic for another installment of the Breaking Brews Podcast. I am your host, Jason Sircone, and if you love the Breaking Brews Podcast as much as I do, hop over to iTunes, drop a rating and review. You can also pick up the show on Stitcher, Google Play Music, Spotify, and also on Breaking Podcast, where you can find links to show notes, information about the show, any upcoming contests, all that good stuff. All right, it is time for session 8. I am joined by the crew from Levity Brewing Company in Indiana, Pennsylvania. And the subject at hand is creating the ultimate taproom experience. Today, I look at loyalty a little bit different. I think to some degree, loyalty still has some of that old school feel, but at the same time, folks are looking for new things to do. They always want to, and even if they find a place that they absolutely love, they know they'll come back, but they're still going to check out other places. And with so many different venues pulling for people's entertainment buck, it's imperative that businesses create an experience that's going to bring people back a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth time, and beyond. And to do that, you have to go the extra mile. Because like I said, if people don't have a memorable experience or something that really captivates them or something they can tell their friends about, they're probably not going to come back. They're going to go to the next place. I think our guests today have really done a great job of taking that extra step and creating an entire experience from top to bottom. As you'll learn on the show, it started with beer, and then it grew from there. They started with food trucks, but had an idea to incorporate food into their practices, grew as they did. You'll learn, as we discussed, as they started incorporating more of a diverse menu with more selections, people started sticking around a little bit longer. And then from there, they've taken it to the next level with live music and events that are pretty unique to their spot. The ukulele jam, as you'll learn, is something that was brought to their attention, and they have taken it and run with it, which is pretty cool. They have a summer festival at Levity every year to kick the season off. Overall, it's the type of place that you look at for not just one aspect. There's multiple reasons to visit, and again, this is where I think a lot of places are going to need to go just to create that type of experience that's going to bring a person back again. Before we jump into the show, a couple quick things that I want to point out about Levity Brewing. First off, here's where you can find these guys on the World Wide Web. You can check out Levity Brewing on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Just look for @LevityBeer, and you can connect to everything about the brand on levitybrewing.com. Also, if you're listening to this episode fresh as it releases, we are at the tail end of March 2019, and Levity Brewing is once again in the running for Best Brewery in Pennsylvania via the Breweries in PA March Madness. Won it in 2018, and they are back in the finals in 2019, which is some really cool shit. Really shows the loyalty that they have built with their customers. They've gotten a lot of votes through all the rounds. And what's even cooler is that they are up against another Pittsburgh brewery, Dancing Gnome out of Sharpsburg, which is another very popular brewery, not just in our region, but they've been getting recognition across the country. So it's really cool to see two breweries from Western Pennsylvania make it to the finals, and they're going to go head-to-head. So as this show is recording, or as you're listening to it, if you're within the confines of the end of March and early April 2019, I am going to include a link in the show notes where you can vote for your favorite brewery. You can vote for Levity. You can vote for Dancing Gnome. The choice is yours. I'm not trying to sway you one way or the other, but jump over to that website. Go to breakingbrews.com/podsession8, and you'll be able to connect to the link, and I'll be sharing it throughout the next few days over social media as well. Vote for your favorite. Again, congratulations to both breweries for making it to the finals. I'm very excited to see who comes out on top. With that, it is time to dive into Session 8 of the Breaking Brews Podcast. I will step aside and let you guys listen in. Enjoy the show. Well, here we are in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and I am joined with a star-studded cast. It's a beautiful Monday morning in early February as we sit down to record this podcast and enjoy some lovely salted caramel goza. That's right, salted caramel goza. It's as good as it sounds. Today's show is going to talk about creating the ultimate taproom experience. And these guys here at Levity Brewing have been running strong for over 3 years now, just over 3 years as we sit down to record this. And they've done some great things with incorporating food into their beer rotation, also doing... For those of you listening, you're going to pick up some great tips on how to cultivate that experience within your own tap room. And I'm going to let these guys be the ones to impart that knowledge because they're the experts after all. So I'm going to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves and say hello so you can get to know everybody's voice because we got all 4 mics going today. First off, we've got Luke, one of the co-founders here at Levity, and I think the numbers guy, correct?
Correct.
All right. Welcome to the show, Luke.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great to be here. I'm here a lot in the Levity tap room, but it's great to be here with you. We don't get to see you enough.
I know. I really need to sublet my place and just get out to Indiana and stay here.
Well, we don't.
Yeah.
Come visit.
If I spend enough time here, my accent might change.
Your accent.
Yeah. Apparently, I learned about my northern PA accent from Luke today before we got started. We're also joined by Jay. He is the head brewer and also a co-founder here at Levity. What's up, Jay?
Hey, what's up?
Now the man. Third on the docket, we are joined by Tony, who I learned before we started helped put the whole kitchen together here. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you very much.
Tony
Good to be here.
Tony Versace.
Tony Versace.
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 Nice.
A nice Italian
I
flair
know.
to
I
it.
dig a good, very enunciated Italian last name. That's fantastic. And last but certainly not least, we are joined by Dave, who is the kitchen manager. What's up, Dave?
Hey.
Brevity. He loves it.
It's a man of few words.
That
but
actually
very
was
potent. That's
the
a
most
lot.
I've heard him speak
Yeah.
in 3 weeks.
Really coming out of your shell, buddy.
Yeah, what's it? Major League. Bob, they don't call him the best color man in the game for nothing, folks. So let's get started, guys. So let's hear some background about all of you guys. We can be as short or long-winded with this as you like, but what did you do before you got started here with Levity Brewing, and ultimately what led you into wanting to start a brewery?
I'll go first. This is Luke here, and prior to Levity, I grew up in Indiana, PA, my hometown, and I went to Indiana University of Pennsylvania, IUP, right here. I started off as an entrepreneurship major, and I just wanted to start a business, but I didn't know exactly what. Along the way, somebody convinced me, well, you should probably try to get an employable skill with your college dollars. So I went into accounting and finance and worked for a local bank, S&T Bank, for 10 years in small business lending and credit analysis. And so I got to lend money to good businesses and watch them all well for businesses, what goes wrong with them, and learn some lessons over those 10 years. And then somewhere along the way, it just seemed like a great idea to have a brewery in Indiana because they're popping up all over the place, across Pennsylvania, across the country. Pittsburgh, every time I went down there was a new one, and I loved visiting those and home brewing. And the two loves came together, and it seemed like the right time to get one going in Indiana. So I talked to my friends Eric Walls and Jay Herman, and we started working on it in earnest about 6 years ago. 2012, 13?
Probably 2013.
2013-ish. And took about 3 years to get it off the ground, and we've been running for 3 years, and it's just been a crazy, interesting whirlwind of learning and meeting new people, and just a huge life change from working a 9 to 5 at a bank and going to this with 30-some employees and open 6 days a week with the restaurant and bar here and wholesale out to bars and restaurants. Yeah, lots going on. Who's up next?
Jay, you were a teacher in a prior life, correct?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, come to think of it, Jason, I was thinking, even though my title is brewer, and Tony could probably speak to this too, as he was a professional educator. I when you're a teacher, you teach out of it's an intrinsic passion, and so I was thinking, have the opportunity later this week. I'll be actually teaching at IUP tomorrow in a chemistry class, and having that class come down to the brewery here later in the week for a tour too. And I was thinking, once a teacher, always a teacher, and that regardless of the fact that I really never want to step foot inside of a classroom again, or at least not every day, the passion to teach remains, and so I'll always consider myself a teacher if I can. But that's why I enjoy doing stuff like this. If there's anything we can impart, I can help impart to someone else. It's a great joy for me. But yeah, I too went to IUP. I was a biology and general science educator. Most recently in my teaching career, I taught at Woodland Hills, so commuted from Indiana to Pittsburgh. It is not that far. I know folks from Pittsburgh think we're really way out there, but it's actually the same distance from Indiana to Pittsburgh as it is from Pittsburgh to Indiana. And I commuted there daily for 6 years. Before that, I did some teaching in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C. And trust me, even though I only had about a 12-mile commute, it took every bit as long as my commute from Indiana to Pittsburgh, just because of Beltway traffic and so forth. But yeah, getting the brewery off the ground it's crazy. It's already 6 years or so since we first toyed with this idea. Funny thing is, Luke and I, going way back, had always had entrepreneurial pursuits, ambitions. And the funny thing is, we didn't always know exactly what that business would be that we wanted to open up. And funny thing is, we'd be homebrewing together, and Eric would be homebrewing. He sort of had entrepreneurial ambitions as well. And we'd be sitting there homebrewing together. We would talk about entrepreneurial things, desires. What business could we start? What business could we start? And then in the same evening, we'd be like, I can't wait till why won't anybody start a brewery in Indiana, PA? And I think at the time we opened, probably the closest brewery to us is still about 35 or 40 miles away. Yeah, and so I guess eventually it did get through our thick skulls that, this is the business we should open. And so here we are, 3 years, doors open, and we still have the lights on. So I guess that's a good thing.
Growing and succeeding, it's awesome. So we'll come back to this. I wanted to just ask you a couple things about the development of the brewery from the start. But let's talk to Tony and Dave first. So what are your guys' roles here at Levity?
Initially, my role, I was a school counselor for 34 years. Grew up in the food business, though. My parents had delicatessens in the New York City area, and that's where I worked all through college, all my young adult life, my late teens. That's what I did. I helped my parents make food, serve customers, make salads, did that, but I left the family business when I was 18, and I went to college, got a degree in school counseling, so I did that for 34 years. Soon as I retired, these gentlemen were contemplating opening this business and asked me to help on some festivals. And after they were opened and realized they needed some kind of a food venue here, asked me to develop some recipes for them with the resources that were available. And I said, sure. And that's how I got involved with Levity.
So I worked at a pizza shop for 7 years prior to starting here. Started here back in March of 2018, just as a shift worker, and then a couple months down the way, the kitchen manager position opened up, and they offered it to me, so I obviously took it. Been working in this role ever since.
All right.
Where did Levity come from?
We tell a different story every time, I think.
That's
Yeah.
what I heard last time. I want to hear what you had to say today.
I woke up one morning with a tattoo. It said Levity, and I said,
That's
it.
Yeah.
Still don't know where that tattoo came from. But
We kicked around a lot of ideas and a lot of names and went through the process of just weeding them out. And it took a long time to figure out, like, what's our brand going to be? What's our name going to be? It was hard. It was
Yeah.
a lot of work. But
It's a great name, and one of the reasons why I asked that question, because I've always dug your guys' name. It's pretty cool.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But we landed on that because we were pretty. Beer is generally a lighthearted beverage. You have a beer with people when you're maybe at the end of a long work day, and you get together with a couple friends, family member. You have a lighthearted conversation. You relax, and so we keep it lighthearted around here. Our tagline is "Serious beer for the light at heart." And that's just kind of how we approach things. Like make a good product, serve people well, work hard at it, run a good business, but have fun, enjoy it. Like people come in here, and when they walk through the door, they kind of breathe a sigh of relief. A lot of times, you can kind of notice, and they sit down and have a nice time and laugh it up, and that's what we want. That's what we're going for in everything we do here.
So what sort of styles are you specializing in, Jay?
oh boy, ironically, I was at the bus stop last week with my neighbor, and he was pretty funny because he said, "I guess you guys are sort of a sour brewer, aren't you?" And I was like, "Well, why do you say that?" And he's like, I saw 4 sours on your menu, and you don't go into breweries that have that many sours. And I was thinking, I came in that same day, and I was like, yeah, we have 4 sours, but we had 7 IPAs. Oh, but I guess IPAs, especially here in Western Pennsylvania, Nobelstein, those guys are great. They're right up the road from us. But other than that, we're pretty far from another brewery, and so I think a lot of the brewers that are down in Pittsburgh proper are they sort of have their niche that they brew almost exclusively, probably 70 to 90% all, whatever, IPAs, sours, whatever. Here in Indiana, we try to brew something for everybody, and of our own beers on tap, and then we also have another 5 or 6 in bottle. The bottled stuff tends to be barrel aged, whether it's bourbon. Actually, we don't have any more bourbon beers, but it tends to be wild, the things that are in bottle. But we like to do quite a diversity of beers, and like I said, we generally have a lot of. I also do quite a few kettle soured and truly wild beers throughout the year. Yeah, plus, hey, we have a Pilsner, we have wheat beer, we have an amber ale, we have a brown ale, a couple of stouts.
I'll say that's one thing I've always really dug about your guys' beer selection. There's a tremendous amount of diversity, from the brown ales to the IPAs to the wild sours to the kettle sours. There's always something for every palate. It's good stuff. It's pretty sizable brewing system back there too, correct? 15 barrel?
It's a 10 barrel.
10 barrel, okay.
We do have a number of double-sized fermenters and bright tanks, so we will double batch a number of beers. But yeah, 10-barrel brew house. We probably have something like 1,400 barrel annual capacity right now, without any additional fermenters and things like that. But we also have a huge. People don't understand the building we're in is basically 5 acres under roof, and we're the only tenant in this building currently. Well, there might be somebody storing some stuff in the back, but it's a good say,
It's huge.
7 iron away from us.
That's a story I'll never forget when I came through with PA Brew Tours when you guys were just getting started and construction was just getting underway, and we're just wandering around checking things out, and I went upstairs where your brew house is, and I looked to the back as far as it would go. I was like, how in the hell are they going to maximize this much space? Like, it just seemed insane. And then I learned later, after actually talking to you guys, how it was going to be divided up into a more manageable area.
Right.
But I guess it's nice to know if you ever did need to fill that much space, you've got some options.
Room to grow.
Yeah.
The-
Room to grow.
The wonderful part, too, is we have parking like crazy. I mean,
Yeah.
this was at one time, this facility was a window manufacturer. I think they had 400 employees roughly working per shift, and that means they also had the space for it, for those people to park. And so when we do things like our outside festivals over the summer, our summer festival and other ample parking below the building, and we can actually close off our upper parking lot and do really cool outdoor events. So
I just tell people we have infinite parking. But really, it's like a Walmart parking lot size
really
parking.
is.
I mean, when it's all put together, that's about how big it is.
So one of you guys had mentioned earlier that you were the first brewery to come to Indiana since Prohibition lifted. I guess that also makes you the first brew pub to come to the area. So at what point in time did you decide to incorporate food into your... Was it in those beginning early stages, or was it after you opened your doors? The other.
Food was part of our original plan, leaving room for it. We were just highly focused on the beer, and that's what we need to do is beer first. And food was more of an afterthought, but we at least wisely left room in the construction plans for a kitchen, and not a huge one, and not a heavily equipped kitchen. David is he's the guy with boots on the ground in the trenches of running the kitchen, so he can attest to the limitations.
It's not a very big kitchen.
Not a very big kitchen, but at least it's there, and
And
Right.
at least it no longer shares space with office supplies, the dishwashing area.
Yeah.
It-
We
it-
stuffed a lot of stuff into it
we had
before.
a lot of stuff
right
in that.
at the beginning. And it's, slowly crowded that stuff out to other areas, and it runs pretty smoothly, although I know
Cramped.
some people would ask for more space. But yeah, early on, right from the beginning, we said we want to have a food option. So what we started to do right off the bat was food trucks. We had food trucks in, and that worked to a degree. It was challenging to keep them scheduled and have it be there on a regular basis. And we had a very small food offering at the beginning from our own kitchen. We started offering small food, and
Going back, I've looked at this a couple times, and in the very, very first business plan that may have been 34 pages long or something, I think we dedicated an entire paragraph, maybe two, to food. But it plan, and I think it was April. We got doors open in January of 2016, and I think in April of 2016 is when we first started doing some food of our own, but we were still bringing in food trucks even after we had some of our own menu items.
What type of items were you guys doing at the very beginning?
Initially, when we started, and I was asked to help develop some recipes and menu items, we had to work within the confines of our smaller kitchen, but Luke and Jay were always willing to buy any kind of equipment that we needed. But we wanted to start small because the kitchen was small. We didn't have a lot of resources. So we started doing some hero sandwiches. We call them heroes in New York City. So I grew up. So we did some hero sandwiches, developed a recipe for some pulled pork and some sauces for the pulled pork. And we had a big pretzel, developed some sauces for the pretzel. So I think when we first started, we only had a few sandwiches, some pulled pork sandwiches, pretzels, things like that. And I think probably the wisdom behind starting small is that we learned the craft as we were going along. So every time, once we saw that people weren't leaving to go to dinner someplace, and they were actually coming here and wanting to eat, then we started slowly developing more menu items, trying to please as many palates in the Indiana area as possible, and trying to develop food that would be interesting to a large number of people in the community.
I've always heard that, it just seems logical if you give them a reason to stay, which would be food, they're going to order at least 1 to 2 more drinks, just in the time that it takes for that dinner to arrive or lunch to arrive, as well as maybe even during and then after. So, yeah, that's obviously a great factor that goes into it.
Can I say one more thing?
You sure can.
When we started, we had 4 menu items, and right now we have 2 full pages of menu items, and we've gotten to the point now, I think, where we've maxed out the system in terms of what we can easily do for our customers, and I think almost every menu item that we currently have sells very well.
Breakneck Tavern in Mars is the North Hills' premier destination for culinary greatness. They specialize in approachable, elevated cuisine featuring sustainable seafood, house-smoked meats, award-winning chicken wings, and much, much more. Thirsty? Breakneck Tavern has 40 taps pouring your favorite local and regional craft beers, as well as a diverse wine and whiskey menu with offerings from around the world. Happy Hour runs 4 to 7 p.m. Monday through Thursday and 5 to 7 p.m. on Friday. Visit www.breaknecktavern.com to learn more, and follow them at Breakneck Tavern on Facebook, Instagram.
So you guys mentioned earlier that starting small was something that worked to your advantage. What are some other factors that folks should take into consideration when they are considering incorporating food into their operation?
There's probably several things. I'll start with one of the things that kind of surprised us, I think, and that is the people element, the number of people it takes to run a kitchen. So we spent all our time and energy thinking about the beer side and figuring that out and doing construction and just daydreaming about how to run that and grow that business. But when we opened up the food side, Tony came in. We just had zero experience or expertise in running a kitchen and restaurant. So Tony was a huge asset to us, a huge blessing because he came in with lots of knowledge of food, a great care for the product and for taking care of customers and doing things at a high level. And he really led the charge on that. And I think it's fair to say that we would not have been able to pull off any of it without Tony's else. I don't know anybody else who would have come along to do what he did.
When you talk about Tony, what immediately stood out is Tony's affections for food and philosophy behind food are they align themselves. They're parallel with our own philosophies of beer. And Tony's had us over to his own home at different times, and food for him is a lot like beer for us. I mean, it is a central piece to bringing people together, and so I think that's an aspect of it too. He had an incredibly similar vision where food was that centerpiece to what our vision was for beer and how it brought people together. But it's a little bit of a side note, but it is, like Luke was saying, an incredible amount of man hours to effectively run, prepare, and then effectively serve a customer.
Something that was pretty important to all of us initially, and as we grew the food side of the business, was that we just didn't want to be an average burger and fries joint. We wanted to have upscale, good, fresh, wholesome American food. And if I did not like it, and I would make the food for all of the owners, and if they didn't like it, it would not go on. It had to taste good and it had to be fresh. No stale things hanging around, nothing like that. It would be discarded immediately. So we wanted to offer something to this Indiana population that was not already being given to them by a different restaurant or a different bar in the area.
I think that's a great approach because you already are bringing them fresh beer, and that's not something they were experiencing. To also have that food element tie in is great.
Right.
So, have you guys discovered people coming here just to eat, not so much to have beer?
Yeah, absolutely. We have regulars, and I know even my wife's boss. I know he and his wife, they come here every Wednesday night because they come here for dinner. And of course they have a couple beers, but we have a number of people are in that category. They make it a weekly thing or multi-times a week. They come here because they can eat. One of my early observations was just that before we had food, a Friday night we'd open at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we'd get this rush. We'd get the right after work, happy hour kind of crowd from 3 o'clock to 6:30. And then all of a sudden, it would empty out. The place would empty out on a Friday night. And maybe around 9 o'clock, it would start to pick up again. But it had this huge lag time. And now, and it didn't just happen overnight, but with the food introduction, all of a sudden trough of, wave of people leaving, that ended. And now the seats are full. You open at 3 on a Friday, and the seats are full till 10:30 at night. So the food helped level out that.
Another thing that the food does is it brings in families.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, parents will bring their kids in, and then they can eat mac and cheese or whatever, and just brings families in instead of just, like, people over 21. It appeals to also the under 21 crowd in a sense.
Is there a lot of emphasis on the food and beer pairing element with the menu, or is it more or less just here's some very approachable food to put next to our approachable beer and come and go to town?
I wouldn't say that we developed all of the food menu items with a specific beer in mind. I've noticed that people have very specific tastes in beer. And someone can come in. I've known people that only loved IPAs. They would come in, have their IPAs, but they would go through every menu item. So I didn't necessarily, I'm not quite sure they're doing it now, but we didn't do that specifically. However, if a food item really paired well with something, like our salsa that we used to sell here all the time, with a certain, maybe a wheat beer, we would advertise those pairings on Facebook or wherever they did the advertising.
So clearly you guys have got a nice lockdown on the beer and the food. What other entertainment elements have you added to really cultivate the entire experience here in your tap room?
In the tap room, we frequently bring in bands. I would say 3 times a month we probably have a band, live band, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4-piece band. We have a small tap room, and the acoustics aren't awesome for loud music, but we've done some things to mitigate that, and they keep the volume down a little bit. So there's some limitations, but so we try to bring in bands that will bring a crowd, bring their own fan base, hopefully, and some of them develop a fan base in Indiana, even though they're coming from somewhere else. We've seen that with a couple bands from State College. And what else do we do during the week? We do a ukulele jam. This is an odd one. Somebody came to us from IUP, and they said, hey, we have this Indiana, PA ukulele club, and we get together and play ukuleles. Can we do that at your place? And I was like, yes. They started organizing these events, and we put it midweek. We put it on Wednesday afternoon or Wednesday evening. It's just an event. People will bring their kids, and what they do is through the music department at IUP, they have access to maybe 20 ukuleles, 15 or 20 ukuleles, and they'll bring them. People can borrow them or bring their own, and they curate a playlist on YouTube of a bunch of karaoke ukulele songs. So on the screen will be the chords and the words, and over the music, over the sound system, will be the music, and everybody plays along, strums their ukuleles, and learns chords, and sings their hearts out, and it's hilarious and fun. So it's just a lighthearted couple hours, and yeah, you walk. Sometimes though, like say, a new person will walk in and not know what's going on, and they walk right into the middle of ukulele jam, and there's 40 people singing and playing ukuleles and staring at a screen, and it's people just are bewildered, and it's really great to watch. But
So you guys have also developed a pretty successful summer festival here. Tell us about how that went down, how it all came together, and ultimately how it's evolved since its inception.
Early on, Levity became known for our music that we were having on a fairly regular basis, and it only seemed fitting to sort of have a large day dedicated to music and beer. And fortunately, we have great township that we're in here, and we have to make sure that everybody is safe and things like that, but we are totally permitted to have open containers out across our parking lot. Now, we do have defined legal definition of where the transaction for the beers can take place as determined by the PLCB, but the parking lot, our upper parking lot, we rope it off, and people can come and set up lawn chairs, and we set up a big stage and have bands all day long. We've even had a couple vendors. Last year, we had a couple different vendors come in locally, and we may do that again this year as well. And it's just a great day to really enjoy the outside. We've batted 1,000 over the last few years with weather. Indiana, Pennsylvania is not necessarily known as a sunshiny location. It can be quite dreary here. It's every year, and not just our summer festival, but other events as well that we've done outside. We've really, really, really been fortunate with good weather.
we celebrate Tom Cruise's birthday every year.
Yeah, that's a big one.
That's July 3rd. It also happens to be July
Something with the
Independence
country.
Day Eve.
Oh, right.
So people have off work the next day, but the real reason is Tom Cruise's birthday. So we kind of do the same thing. We have a couple bands in the evening and serve beer outside and just have a whoop it up outside. So but the format is no cover charge, no ticket to get in, and several bands and hang out in the sun. And it's at the beginning of summer, and imagine that good bands and drinking beer in the parking lot in the sun with your friends.
Beer,
Success,
bands,
people love
Battlestar Galactica.
Don't you?
What would you tell an aspiring entrepreneur like you guys are if they were looking to open a brew pub? What are the most important aspects that they should pay attention to right at the start?
Always, always, always have good liquid. Can't underscore that point enough. But after that, especially as it relates to the food, analyze it a lot. One of the things that if early on, we isolated just our cost to make the food and sell the food, and it actually was a big loser. Now, the other aspect is it keeps people in seats, and it keeps a lot more liquid flowing, and the liquid obviously is going to be your best, most profitable product that you're going to sell here, a draft beer. But be paying attention to what you're doing and making sure looking at waste. Food is a very perishable item.
Probably one of the things that I thought about frequently when I was doing this here was whenever we developed a new menu item, we go slowly. We'd add one new menu item at a time, so we didn't have to recreate a whole new menu. We would do it slowly. But what we do when we created a new menu item, we always wanted to borrow aspects from other menu items that we can use in the new menu item, as opposed to sourcing all new food and all new elements to a new menu product. So we always wanted to borrow, so we would keep our food costs low. That's what we did.
At the beginning, in the planning stages, I would say think long term too about where do you want to, how big do you want to grow, and how much do you want to offer to your community, and think about the space long and hard, and take your time finding the right space, because I've seen some places get sort of boxed in by their space, and they don't have room to grow, and most breweries that are opening up do find they're usually surprised by, like we were, by people's reaction to their brewery in their community, that wow, people really love this. It's going better than we thought it was going to, and we really want to grow. We need to grow, and sometimes people get boxed in by the space they're in. We have in some ways we're boxed in terms of our taproom space, but there was some other, these big parking lots and room out front. We found that we had this huge resource we didn't really even understand at the beginning with these giant parking lots. Everybody can park here right on site, and we can
it's free parking
and
too.
It's free parking, and it's off street, and it's and we can shut one of them down and have a party in it and still have enough parking for everybody. So we didn't even realize how cool that was until after the fact. But just the space, plan on growing and make sure that the space is going to accommodate you.
Because we wanted people to come in and drink the beer and eat the food, but we also wanted to make sure that we're using the beer in our recipes. So if someone's starting out, and if you do want to start a food service, make sure you're incorporating your beer in some of your recipes. This way you kill two birds with one stone.
That's a great tip. All right, guys. Well, thanks for taking some time to tell us about what you do here at Levity, how you've really done a tremendous job of creating the ultimate taproom experience. We got beer, we got food, we've got entertainment. So if you're local to the area, as Jay referenced earlier, you're only an hour from Indiana if you're in the Pittsburgh area. So we're going to sign off, guys. Thanks a lot again for coming on the Breaking Brews podcast, and we'll catch up with you again soon.
Thanks, Jason.
Thanks, man.
This session of the Breaking Brews podcast is in the history books. Did you like what you heard? Help the show find the ears of more thirsty beer enthusiasts just like you. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. Drop a rating and review, and share every episode on Twitter and Instagram using the hashtag BBPod. That's BBPOD. Follow Breaking Brews on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube for daily content about your favorite adult beverage, and check out breakingbrews.com/podcast for updates on the show. We'll catch you on the next session of the Breaking Brews podcast.